started in hard times to bring us all in. Into the laughter through thick and through thin. For public power enthusiasts without and within. Roll on, enthusiasts, roll on.
Welcome to a special Buzzed History recording of Public Power Underground. I'm the host, Paul Dockery. I'm recording with three energy experts and historians. First is Crystal Ball, the Executive Director of the Pacific Northwest Utilities Conference Committee. Hello, Crystal.
Hi, Paul.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We should probably introduce the space. We're in Keys Lounge.
This is pretty cool ambiance.
It's a great ambiance.
Yeah.
Located on Killingsworth.
Northeast side of P-Town.
That's right. In a historic locksmith.
Historic.
Locksmith.
Oh, there's a theme going on here.
Yes. Is there a theme? Okay, that's good. That's perfect if there is. Next is Shauna McReynolds, an early friend of the Underground, which I dearly appreciate.
Yep.
And
big fan.
Executive Director Emeritus of PNUC. Hi, Shauna.
Oh, that's a good title. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Paul. This is really fun.
Also a complete person, not just to be ascribed by the former titles. You are a complete person with children and grandchildren.
Lives and dog and...
Absolutely.
So whole thing.
Just be...
Yeah, and it took me a little bit to find this place.
Yes.
It's on the other side of town.
It's a really nice little hole in the wall. That's really cool. It's really nice.
I brought my key I need a copy of.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. That's exactly what they do
here.
here.
Okay, lounge.
Yes, at the locksmith. Lastly, our special guest star, Mark Ohrenschall. There's an applause button and everything.
Oh, okay.
Mark is the outgoing executive editor of the industry news publication and production partner of Public Power Underground NewsData. I put this together really to celebrate your contributions to Public Power Underground and the industry and your wealth of history and knowledge about our industry that we love. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Paul. It's great to be here. And yeah, I guess I am. I've lived some history, which means I'm old. But thank you.
You know, it's a privilege. It's a privilege to have the honor of making it through all that lived history. And I think today is your last official day?
It's my last official day. NewsData will have a new publisher on Monday. I'll be around for a few more days to help him get settled.
So there's something we should be watching for in today's edition?
There actually might be something in today's Clearing Up that might involve something with this transition, yes.
All right, thank you.
I can't wait to read the news.
I know. Maybe our phones will blink while we're...
Oh, that's true. It's already up.
It is already out. It is, yes, because now we should do a promo for NewsData. You can get the digital version earlier. Exactly. Oh, they're going to be very proud of us, Mark. They're going to be so proud of us. Okay.
What way to go on your last day.
That's right. No, you never stop marketing, right? That's
Okay, well, we're doing a buzzed history of the electric industry on today's recording because it felt slightly irreverent as a slightly irreverent way of celebrating Mark's history in the industry while providing some infotaining value to our listeners. I've been reflecting on all the context it takes to productively participate in regional conversations, from the acronyms to the statutes and the myriad of rationale for things that have been decided along the way. So today, we're going to start the journey in as infotaining a way as we can muster with an acronym anagrams. Acronym anagrams.
You made up the term. You need to say it right.
I need to say it right.
Acronym anagram.
Yes, and Crystal, you gave me some bananagrams, the game for children and adults.
Oh, absolutely, children and adults. Yes, it's a fun game.
You let the kids play with you?
The kids beat me.
So I have to just chime in here. You don't know this, but at PNUC we had a rule for a long time. Besides the word PNUC, we were a no acronym organization.
I honor that. That's a good way to do it.
So if I'm kind of slow here, I already have my backup excuse.
Yeah, I think more of us should be no acronym, anti-acronym organizations.
Yeah, except for PNUC.
It's just too much of a mouthful.
And it's fun to say.
One of my pet peeves, I will share this, I think I've shared it on the podcast before, is when an organization goes from, an acronym that actually means something to just the letters.
Yeah.
Because some organizations will do that. They'll just go.
This is really random. You know who did that?
Who did that?
The FFA.
The FFA is no longer the Future Farmers of America?
No.
And you know that because...
I lived it. I have served on boards that figured that out, decided that. Not me.
Okay, so you're partly to blame, is what I am
Nope.
hearing. But I thought it was because your daughter has a dairy farm.
She does.
Okay.
And she did the FFA.
She did the FFA.
Yeah.
Okay, your daughter was a future farmer of America.
And now she's just an FFA member.
She's just an FFA member. This is a good way to explain the game we're about to play, okay?
Yep.
Because what we're doing is acronym anagrams, but that means we're going to reshuffle the letters in an acronym. So
I'm writing them down.
For FFA, I would say I've randomly scrabbled them to other words, right? So for FFA, I'd say AF, and then you would have to raise your buzz in.
Yeah, I'm buzzing in.
You're buzzing in. I don't know if we'll actually do a
FFA.
buzz or not. And then you would say FFA, which
Yeah.
stands for...
Was Future Farmers of America.
And part of the context for this is that NewsData has an entire webpage.
We do, and I
dedicated-
have no excuse for not knowing any energy acronym because, it's on our website. Reference it. If you need acronyms, it's a good start.
Why don't we have that up as a cheat
We
sheet?
should.
Because that would be cheating.
Pull up
and
your
I'm
phone.
not in favor of that. I'm not absolutely
I
not in
Google
favor of that.
everything. I Google everything.
But I did use it for this game.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So it was the
Mark's
source
gonna win.
of the acronym. Well, we're going to...
I mean, I was on favor, but that doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to win. Just like in sports,
we are going
right?
to judge him if he doesn't. I mean, obviously. It is a celebration, and that includes some judgment, maybe? I don't know. That got
We'll
dark.
consider it a roast. How's that?
Yeah, there we go. I like it. There we go.
A roast, yes.
So we're gonna do this acronyms. If you get it, if you say it first and you get it right, you don't have to drink, and the other two have to drink. If you try to buzz in and you get it wrong, then you have to drink.
Okay.
Because it is buzz history, and that felt like a decent way to do.
Got to
buzz.
get buzzed while
This
we're
is
buzzing.
a fun drinking game.
We're getting buzzed.
Maybe
while
a
we
little
buzz.
too drinking game-ish, but we're gonna lean into
We'll
it.
be
This
good.
is-
Yeah.
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 I mean, we're celebrating Mark. It's fine.
I'm retired.
Okay. There we go. I'm taking vacation. To be clear, I'm taking vacation.
I started my day really early.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
The first one, CD.
CD.
DC.
DC.
Y'all drink. Y'all broke the rules. You got it right. What does DC stand for?
Direct current.
There we go. Okay.
I wasn't ready.
You don't have to drink. You got it right.
So did
Maybe
I.
we shouldn't buzz. I don't know. Maybe that
Crystal's
was a
going
bad
to be a
one.
formidable competitor.
Okay.
She's very competitive.
No
We're
one's
gonna
ever
go
said
with-
that about me.
We're gonna do it. We're starting easy. RD.
DR.
Okay. What's it stand for?
You have to hit the buzzer.
You have to hit the buzzer. There we go.
What does
no
it stand
idea.
for? She doesn't know.
Drink.
Demand response.
There we go. Demand response. There we go.
I'm out of practice.
I thought you said VR. Okay, VR.
Okay. Yeah.
That would be
We're
video
working on
review.
Virtual reality.
Actually, I'm retired. It stands for doctor.
Yeah, I mean, you would have gotten that wrong because
I
these are
know.
all Western energy acronyms. Okay, ODE.
OD?
ODE.
You didn't give us the letters, but I'm thinking it's ODE, and so I'm saying DOE. Yes.
And what's that stand for?
Department of Energy.
That's right, Crystal. You're killing this game.
Yeah, you have to give us the letters, Paul.
Is that how this game should be played? Okay. Are you ready? Okay. PHC. Okay, y'all get it wrong. Y'all get it wrong.
Oh, CHP.
Yes. What's it stand for?
Combined heat and power.
Yes. Mark nailed it. Okay.
Not California Highway Patrol. But it could be that
But
too.
it could be.
Okay. I'm going to... This one I'm just going to say it, and then I'll give you the letters if you don't.
Okay.
Fuss. FUSS.
FUSS.
I know. Like I'm trying to scramble
Okay, y'all
in my
lose.
mind.
U.S. Fish and Wild... U.S. Forest Service, USFS.
Oh.
Okay. Ready?
I'm fine.
Oh, drink.
MAW. Yeah, y'all got to drink.
Ham.
MAW. M-A-W.
Oh, megawatt average.
I buzzed.
You buzzed.
Average megawatt.
Yes. Nailed it. Average
I
megawatt.
gave you the
Best
answer
megawatt.
first. I knew that one.
I knew that one too, but Crystal was a millisecond quicker.
Okay, ready?
Well,
Next one?
this
Ready for the next
you're
one?
really tricking us.
Yeah, that's the whole game. It's meant to be fun. Okay, DOR, door.
Rod.
Oh, right.
Record of decision.
Yeah, you are buzzing, but the rest of you got to drink. Shauna, you don't have to do it.
Well, my drink's
You
in the
guys
way
are
of my
too
buzz.
quick.
Yeah,
and which
no.
do you want me to do? Spill a drink on the buzz? Or?
I know, I don't want
Yeah.
you to spill it. Okay, this is
Yeah, I do.
This is for the gold medal. Okay. Crepsy Y-Rab.
Oh my gosh, I buzzed, but now I'm gonna have to come up with it.
Okay, Crepsy Y-Rab.
You each get a chance.
I want the letters.
Okay.
That's a good one. Let us write it down.
You aren't Googling this answer, are you, Crystal?
No, I'm not.
Oh, it's automatically disqualified. Are you ready? I'm not giving you the letters to Crepsy Y-Rab, actually.
Okay.
I'm not giving you the letters.
CREPC.
Okay, you got that?
Yeah.
WIRAB.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, well, you got that right. Okay.
It's a council of
Okay, go, Mark.
Okay, Committee on Regional Electric Power Coordination.
Oh, no. Shauna,
I'm just drinking. I know, but I have no idea because I don't know what the letters are.
Do you want a second guess?
No.
Second guess? You want a second guess, Mark.
Yeah,
Take it
got
away.
really close.
Win the day, Mark. Win the day.
Committee on Regional
Energy Planning Council.
Electric Planning.
I know.
I think I know YRAB, Western Interstate Regional. Oh, geez. Okay.
Yep. This is a good one. I gave
That's
you
not a good one.
Western
That's
Interstate Regulatory.
No. It's the Committee on Regional Electric Power Cooperation.
Okay.
You were really close, Mark. Western Interconnection Regional Advisory
Body.
That's
the I, Western Interconnection.
Yes, not Western Interstate.
That's like a mouthful. That's not an
That's why everybody calls it Crepsy Ryrab.
That's why you call it Crepsy
Well, I can't even say that.
Coming to Seattle this fall.
I'll be there. Will you be there?
Maybe. Should I go?
Yes.
There'd be fun people there. I don't know if
you should go.
Okay. Good advice. Okay, are you all ready? We got through the acronyms. You ready to get into history?
Oh, that was it?
Oh, okay.
We could keep going.
By the way, no one won the gold medal.
Well, no, but Crystal answered the most questions, right? So
she just buzzed faster.
Public Power Underground is brought to you by the Energy Authority. The Energy Authority is a nonprofit company that specializes in portfolio management and prides itself on leading communities through today's energy transformation. Owned by public power entities, TEA is more than just adjacent. They're as underground as it gets. TEA is on a mission to help clients maximize the value of their assets while meeting their power supply goals. Great mission. By providing expertise in energy trading, advanced analytics, advisory, and renewable solutions, TEA equips public power utilities with access to state-of-the-art resources and technology systems so they can respond competitively in the changing energy markets. With over 60 other public power utilities proudly partnering with TEA to tackle their energy future, it's time for you to consider breaking ground too. Let TEA help you navigate the uncertain future of our industry by visiting TEAinc.org. That's TEAinc.org to learn more today. So we're going to get into the deep questions.
Deep.
To get into it, we brought the Public Power Chronicle, which we want to give credit where credit is due. Public Power Council commissioned the Public Power Chronicle.
Long time ago.
And it was, I think, a writer from NewsData,
It was. Ben Tanzi was the original writer. I think it's been added on since Ben's time.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the Public Power Chronicle is a guide to public power in the Pacific Northwest for the 21st century. Got a hard copy here. Thanks to Karen Heim.
I had the thought when I was doing my homework for this little project that this is well done and we could use another decade worth of information.
Yes, we could. I wonder who might be leaving a job that's a great writer.
They could probably dig into that. Probably has some history already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make me an offer. I can't refuse.
Leading question. So in the back, it goes from 1832 to 2013, as noted before. It stops at 2013. And there's a series of milestones that are of importance to the region and in the industry in the region. And the first thing we're going to do is, based on these milestones, I'm going to ask each of you to tell me what your top 3 of these milestones for importance to the region, how you would rank them, not chronologically, but in order of importance. And I'm going to start with you, Mark, on what's your top 1? What's your top of all of the events that are chronicled?
Well, I'm going to think maybe go a little bit out of the box and say the decade of the 1930s, which was, as I think you all know, and many of your listeners, when BPA was created, when the major federal dams were first launching, when the Washington PUD formations were authorized, and really kind of kicked off rural electrification in the Northwest. And it's really the origin story of much of the present day regional energy system. So I'm gonna say the decade of the 30s. I know that's not strictly speaking answering your question.
I know it, which is a journalist. I don't know how you get away with that. I don't know if I should let you get away with it, but you're retiring. So I'll just go through the 30s just to ground everybody. Yeah. So in 1930, Washington and Oregon voters approved initiatives approving the creation of PUDs. Very important milestone. 1933 was the construction beginning on Grand Coulee Dam. In 1936, we have the Rural Electrification Act. In 1937, we have the Bonneville Project Act. And in 1939, Alcoa builds the Northwest's first aluminum plant.
Why did you use Alcoa as a anagram?
Oh, that would have been a good one.
So this is not a thing I know. Is that an acronym for something? It's just a company to me that's named Alcoa.
Aluminum Company of America.
Okay, these are new things that I'm learning. I want to make clear in here, it's just a capital A and then Alcoa. So this would make it perceived to me as if it is not an acronym.
An acronym.
It is it's just the name of a company.
You should have buzzed for that.
That's right. Can we start the game again, the anagram game?
I know.
I love this.
He wins the gold medal.
Anybody else have the 1930s or any of those milestones on there? You're nodding, Crystal. Which of those? What of those?
And we didn't even compare notes.
Okay.
And I was more true to the rules, and I picked 1937.
1937, the Bonneville Project Act.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was that your top? Where on your list was it?
It was at the top. It really was. 1937 really changed the region.
Yeah.
The Bonneville Dam was finished, completed, right? And then Congress created the Bonneville Power Administration. It was the beginning of rural electrification and preference. And then right after came the 1938, I believe, was the finishing of the Grand Coulee Dam.
Okay, so it began in 1933 and then finished in 1938.
Yes.
Not on the milestone, just knowledge and history you bring.
Wow.
Yes, that's awesome. Okay, was any of the 1930s on your list?
No, but that doesn't mean I don't agree. It's right.
No, that's fine.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't.
Absolutely.
It's a very significant part, but to me, that was the essence of creating the industry we're talking about today.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's born, and then I'm looking at the things that have framed it since then.
Okay. What's the top of your list?
Energy Policy Act of 92.
Energy Policy Act of 1992.
And only because I can remember.
It shows up on 1992 in here.
I know.
It does.
It's one of the
She did her homework.
No, I actually
knew
said
that before.
No, I really remember that era. And I remember coming to our meetings and everybody was frozen in time. We had just quiet people. This has all happened and there's new rules enacted that we're going to be deregulate and we're going to split up our companies and we're going to not be vertically integrated anymore. And there were antitrust issues talked about and people just came to our meetings and just froze. And we'd come back from to the office and go, well, that was interesting.
Because they couldn't talk or they didn't think they could.
They needed to figure out what they could say and how they could work together. And it wasn't the way they did business before, right? I never was in the room, but I know when there was a time and somebody needed power from somewhere, there were these organizations set up and they could pick up the phone and, hey, can I have, and they just talk to each other and then they would figure it all out after the fact and they'd serve their customers. Didn't matter whether you're public power or investor owned. If someone had power and somebody needed it, they got it where it needed to be and then they worked out the details. And to me, that was a huge shift in trying to figure out how to do business. And the symptom was this absolute silence at the table. It's like they just didn't know what they could say.
Yeah.
They were just they were puzzled. So anyway.
Is that the origin of every PNUC meeting we start the meeting with the
antitrust?
Yeah. Is that the origin story for the antitrust statement?
It's in that era. Yeah.
That's really
absolutely.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's good to have that history.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anybody else have the Energy Policy Act of 1992 on their list?
Boy, I didn't, but I should have.
This is not a should have thing. We're all good. They're all great lists.
Well, they're all good milestones, right?
And they're all good milestones. Yeah. They're all important. What was number 2, Mark?
I'm sorry. I just want to go real quickly. 1930. I think you mentioned 1939 Alcoa.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm pretty sure you all know, and others know, that Alcoa was one of the major forces for winning World War II with Northwest Hydropower, creating, I believe, the B-52s.
He's
I think
still
some of you are
marketing.
familiar. No. I'm not talking about NewsData. I'm talking about.
He's promoting the Northwest.
Promoting
the rest of his life.
No, that's good. You can keep doing that.
So just a little historical tidbit. Sorry.
Yeah.
So it was that this was the first of many. More than one. Yeah. And then it was the construction of these aluminum power plants.
Yeah.
What else is on your list? So what's number 2 on your list? Your number 1 was...
Yeah, number 2 on my list is the 1980 Northwest Power Act.
Okay, 1980 Northwest Power Act.
Yes.
And what's included in the 1980 Northwest Power Act? Let me reference the summary here. It's the Pacific Northwest Electric Power Planning and Conservation Act. Is signed into law, creating the Northwest Power Planning Council, which would later become
Northwest Power and Conservation Council. Thank you to Larry Cassidy.
Okay.
Member
for changing it.
Washington member.
And it also sets the standards for BPA regarding acquiring resources and setting rates for the sale and disposition.
And people forget about
energy.
That. Setting the standard for BPA acquiring resources.
Okay.
Yeah.
That standard that is to plan for adequate resources to meet the net hourly load. Maybe adequate planning is a really important part. Or that the council has
any role of it, I guess is my point.
Yeah.
Yeah. That because of the act, the council has some right. I guess maybe people don't forget about it. Maybe people today just don't know about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
We're informing people about the importance of the Northwest Power and Conservation Council. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and it created the power plan, right? 20-year power planning in the region. But it also gave BPA that mitigation responsibility for fish and wildlife. So 2 things there, the power planning and then fish and wildlife mitigation. I learned about this really, coming into the industry, but being in Washington, D.C. and thinking about how things get done there. And you really have to have, somebody in a strong position to be an advocate for that kind of thing. And we had at the time Senator Mark Hatfield, and he was in a very powerful position. And it's one of the reasons why Congress was able to unite around that idea, and that Senator Hatfield was able to push that through and get support for it. And I don't know if there has been a time since that the delegation has been as powerful.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So that's why it's on my list.
That's a very good number 2. Anybody else have that on their list?
I went outside the box again.
You keep going outside the box.
I had the whip stabicle, which I know we're going to talk about, but that helped precipitate leading to the act. So, Crystal, great summary of the act and a lot of its important features, but the whip, I think, helped precipitate that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I have it on my list.
Okay.
And it was really a tough decision for first place or second place, but for multiple reasons. One is pretty personal because as the council was formed and the utilities who were very involved in developing the Power Act, right, and all of their lobbyists and whatnot, the utilities decided they should have a staff. And so the System Planning Office was formed, formerly known as that was the first version of PNUC because we were the system planning group. And so system planning office was opened and a staff of 1 and 2 grew to almost 30. It was 30 at one point in time. They thought somebody should probably be watching that council and what they were doing. Yeah. And then I would add, utilities were already doing some planning, but I do believe, I would say, especially from the early years, that the work at the council staff really added some form and structure to planning. I think the utilities fed off of that. And I don't know if I was very familiar with what the utilities were doing ahead of time, but I think that there was a good synergy that got created by the way the council was laying it out and thinking about it, and maybe they were mimicking what the utilities were already doing and vice versa. But I think there was some really good development in that resource planning world, and that the council staff really put a lot into that and really added value. And we were tracking that. So, but for that act, I wouldn't have had a job.
So it was number 2 on your list.
Yeah. And I would say that's why it was number 2 on my list too. Shauna, you're talking to me about the history of PNUC and how it was very closely associated with the council, and why it made number 2 on my list. Because
I did want to dig a little bit, and I don't know if this is a formal history of PNUC, but the concern associated with the Northwest Power and Conservation Council being formed out of the act, which would give Bonneville some guidance on how to acquire resources. And the utilities, am I interpreting this right? The utilities wanted to make sure that they had input. Is it in some ways a way to be a stakeholder within the council's process? Is that how it was thought of? Because I don't know that I knew this before just now. I'm learning this. Actually, I think I learned it a little bit over lunch and prep for this. But I wanted to tease out that kind of oral history, the utilities' concern or interest in making sure the council planned well for the region.
So there's a lot of data back at the office in Crystal's computer about all of that and what the real intent was. I also believe knowing that this was going to get formed, they wanted to make sure they wanted a hand in if it was going to help them and this 20-year planning horizon and all these requirements. They wanted to make sure it was something. I was not there. I was still going to school, history. Right? This is what I believe I've heard. But they wanted to make sure that it was something that was feasible.
Yeah.
Right, and something that could help.
Yeah.
They also, the Fish and Wildlife issues and concerns were clearly on the horizon, and so they wanted to make sure that that was in a way that would mesh. And so I think that it was more making sure, kind of understanding and help frame it in a way that they could deal with. And one quick anecdote. So Al Wright was the executive director. No, he was not there yet. He was actually the GM at Grant County PUD at the time, prior to becoming the executive director. And he was just going to go to a Fish and Wildlife Committee meeting, and it should be over in a few months. And here we are. I don't know if those are his exact words, but it was a short-term project. And I'm sorry, Al. I don't know that he would ever.
And we're still going to Fish and Wildlife Committee meetings. Yeah. I think is your point.
I think he even made fun of himself, right, in thinking that. But anyway.
So, Mark, you, I think one of the ways I met you first was through the PNUC meetings and the way you've covered the industry. Yeah. How much was the reporting of NewsData tied with PNUC in those days? How much can we credit 1980 and the Northwest Power Act with the formation of NewsData and the industry publication?
Yeah, that's a great question and properly answered by my predecessor, Cyrus, who I don't know when he started attending PNUC. I'm thinking it was probably in the 80s.
When they became
Yeah, he started clearing up in 1902, just about when Shauna was starting there at PNUC. And I know he always found it to be a really valuable resource, as have I for the last, 15 or so years. But in terms of reporting, I made this a little too much insider baseball, but yeah, we show up at PNUC meetings, but we do not report from them. We find out what's going on and we follow up as appropriate. So there's a little bit of a separation there. So we don't go as reporters, we go to find out what's going on and to network and get ideas. But it's honestly the best utility meeting in the region for sure. It always has been. So put on my marketing hat for PNUC.
But let's just say this. In the beginning, in the early years, there was so much going on, but I think Cyrus was focused a little more on other, not what's going forward, but almost looking back a little bit.
Certainly the early years of clearing up were much more focused on And all the lawsuits and all the political machinations and all the cost overruns. And I've read some of the early issues. Yeah, it's just filled with conflict and turmoil and lots of money being spent and lots of lawyers getting rich.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And we'll talk a little bit more about whoops later.
Yeah.
It's one of those topics I want to get deeper into. So I think we have at least the top 2 for everybody. Where are we at? I lost track at this point. Who has a third that they need? Have you given 2 or just 1?
I've given 2 and
I've
credit
given-
Crystal for a co-2.
Yes.
Yeah, and a coach. I have a unique one.
Okay, please give us some more
However,
unique-
it is, I think, a result of 1992's Power Act.
Okay.
And
There's a
also
theme.
there's a theme, but it has to do with, I don't know where you do the benchmark, but it is at a point where we reached enough renewables in the region
Okay.
that the way the system operated, regardless of fish, has flipped on its head.
Yep.
Right? And we went from energy deficits and worrying about that, which is and a critical period of 42 months, whatever that meant. It means we had enough hydro to get us through 42 months for energy. And
Enough storage. To
enough,
get us,
yeah. And we had enough, and so, but we were worried about energy, and if that would do the trick and capacity, heck, you could ramp all those projects up. You'd have all the capacity you needed. It was never an issue. And we flipped on our head, and I really do think it's all the renewables, loads grow, and then and it's all this
Changing resource mix.
variable resources that turned us into a capacity planning focus.
That's fascinating. It shows up on the milestone in 2006. So wind power plants of third parties integrated into the
And then in
bottom of-
12, but I think it's more when you get past 2012.
Oh, it shows up twice. It shows up twice. Okay.
I mean, and the Chronicle has the graph of, within those few years, that's 6 years, we went from 500 to 4,500 megawatts of wind that, and where are we at? 8,000-ish now?
Close to 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we got and the new players, which was also part of of 92 dereg, right? And we've got the IPPs in the mix now, and opening up the transmission access. I mean, I think that just blew it up, and those pieces all really changed how the people at the utility are doing their job and how they think about it.
Yep, absolutely. And I just want to insert my own milestone in here. In 2009, I was commissioning a wind farm in the Columbia River Gorge outside of Walla Walla, where I met my wife.
How big?
100 megawatts, which is a decent size. Yeah.
Which one?
Van Sickle 2.
Van Sickle 2. I
Absolutely.
covered the opening of Van Sickle 1 in 1998.
Yeah, well, Van Sickle 2 was much later.
It was
Yeah.
98 because we had the Congressman-elect Greg Walden there.
Yes. And you were there?
I was
and Rachel
there.
Shimshak from Renewable Northwest was there.
You
and
didn't
all
even,
comes
you didn't
back.
even
And many
know it. Look at
luminaries.
that.
Oh, we knew it.
And how'd you meet?
We
Why'd you
were
meet your
really
wife
young
there?
then, right?
She lived and worked in Walla Walla. She worked on the wind farm.
And I wasn't asking how big she was. I was asking how big the wind farm was.
I think I got that right.
You said 100 megawatts, not 100 pounds.
Exactly. So that great milestone. So that was number 3 on your list. Anything else to add there? Anybody else have that on their list?
I did not, but I had something that probably follows up in what Shauna was talking about, the EPACT, and that is the Western Energy Crisis, which I know we're going to talk about, which in some ways did also, sort of get precipitated from EPACT and sort of opening up, market forces in policy ways. And California was the kind of the proximate example in
What
that
are you
one.
saying?
But
Sorry, EPAC? What?
Energy Policy Act.
I'm sorry, another
come
sort of
on.
acronym.
Energy
You
Policy
need to
Act.
drink.
You have to drink for that.
No, he has to drink for
I
that.
know.
I don't have to
Wait a
drink
minute.
for that.
Okay. The
Mark
Energy
drinks.
Policy Act, which has been popularly known as EPAC.
I've never heard it referred to as that.
That's
Interesting.
what all the lingo was back in the.
I'm in the no acronym place.
Yes.
So.
Energy
Okay.
Policy Act of 2005.
Does it say EPAC in parentheses?
No, it does not.
Okay.
It
Yes.
does not.
Okay.
It
You
does
still
not.
have to drink.
Well, if somebody, if there's somebody we know that updates the book, they can fix that.
There will be acronyms everywhere.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Okay, so you
Poll
had
will
the
be
Energy
in
Policy Act.
letters.
You had the Energy Policy Act of 2005 on your list.
No, you had the energy crisis.
I had the
Energy
Western Energy Crisis of 2000 and
Yes.
2001, which sprang
Was
somewhat
born from.
directly from the Energy Policy Act of 1992.
Wait. Oh,
In some ways, just unleashing a lot of market forces and interest in retail competition, and which led California to restructure, which led in part to
Scarcity.
scarcity. Along with hydro, low hydro, and
we should be. There are two Energy Policy Act. There's the Energy Policy Act of 1992, and then 2005, and you're referring to the 1992.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Sorry, I was reading the wrong milestone there.
So
yes,
I would challenge you. You work for a utility.
I do work for a utility. That's true.
I'm turning this around. I'm going to ask the question.
Oh, please no. That's not that's not this relationship.
Yeah, that's not how this works.
That's not the script.
I'm retired. I don't have to follow any rules.
That's very fair.
So, but really, when you think about milestones, I mean, there's milestones that are notable, but then it is about, I kept thinking about what are the things that really change the way that all the people I know that work in the utility, the resource planners are giving me data for the Northwest Regional Forecast.
Close.
What were the things that made doing their job, what were those big flips? And and that's how I was thinking about
Inflation
it, right?
Reduction Act.
Inflation Reduction Act.
Absolutely.
Changes
everything about the way we think about resource planning.
Say more.
It's going to change the way we think about the way resources are valued, because we got to consider like grants and direct funding. It thinks about the cost of resources, and it actually continues your theme about thinking about energy and capacity, because the energy is negatively priced, marginal. We should expect that to continue. New resources to have negative fuel cost, but then what is the cost of moving that negative energy into the hours you need?
Interesting.
Yeah. We have to rethink that whole dynamic.
And then what do we think about? I kept thinking about how, I don't know how to describe it, but going forward,
Take over this whole podcast.
I'm sorry, I'm almost done. But we just experienced the hottest summer on record, right? And so the planning for the future is we really got it.
Yeah, global warming through this whole
climate
change. Yeah, global warming, climate change. It's all happening.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's your three.
I'm done.
Okay. You had
I'm
your
good.
three.
I've said
What's your third?
It was really interesting. Mark and I did not compare notes, but we were lined up on the first and the last, and we kind of had the same. So I did have the Western energy crisis of 2000-2001 as my third.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all three.
It's just so significant. It increased rates in the region, and there was just a lot of turmoil at the time.
Yeah.
And it shut down markets, and here we are 2 decades later with alternatives to consider, right? And it's because that market design wasn't successful through that turmoil, and so it shut it down. And here we are revisiting it again.
Right. It also really led to all the attention on resource adequacy.
Yeah,
that's really prevalent, as you all know, in power planning and now the RAP. Really, there's a direct through line, I think, from that to the RAP and beyond.
Yeah.
So.
But I had a fourth that's not on the timeline.
Okay, please.
In 2014, the beginning of the Western energy imbalance market.
Yes.
Ooh.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that later. It has its own card as well.
Yes.
I think that is a really important milestone that the next person that updates the Chronicle should take that into account.
Yeah.
And maybe think about that as a really important
starts with
date.
the next year, 2014,
Yeah, it's
and
a great
the
way.
WEIN.
That's how that works.
PAC and
You have to
CAISO.
think about you can't have a milestone for every year. That's a criteria that I have for your rewrite. You can't be like 2013, what was the thing that happened? 2014, what was the thing that happened?
It has to be
2015?
significant.
They have to be
impactful.
significant. Like, what's the
Yeah.
impactful? And I would
Right.
nominate the Inflation Reduction Act and direct pay. We talked about our top three. One of the early ones we talked about was preference. I want to dive in a little bit more to preference. We are Public Power Underground after all. We got to do that. It shows up a few places on the timeline. In 1902, where Congress passes the Reclamation Act, the first federal law to apply the doctrine of public preference to electricity. In 1920, in the passage of the Federal Power Act, giving preference to public where breaking ties for competing application of hydro plants. 1936, where it grants preference to states, munis, PUDs, and cooperatives. In 1937,
Bingo.
the Bonneville Project Act that extends preference to Northwest cooperatives. In 1964, the passage of the Pacific Northwest Power Preference Act, codifying
Regional preference.
the doctrine of regional preference. That's right. You're all over this. You're great. You did your homework. And 1980, the Northwest Power Act that set standards for acquiring resources and setting rates. So I'm going to start with you, Mark. What is preference? Can you explain it to our audience?
I can, and I'll thank the BPA for a little cheat sheet here. So that means that the entities that Bonneville serves, primarily co-ops and PUDs and municipalities, have, as you mentioned, the statutory preference to the available federal power from the Bonneville system, and they can purchase their power at the priority firm rate. So I think you hit on all the sort of enabling, legislation and other things that it created that, but basically puts them first in line for any available power that the federal system has to give. And it also, I think, in practice, it certainly established the BPA customers as, we could probably have a debate on this, arguably the most important constituency that Bonneville has. I mean, I think there could be a debate about that, but certainly they are collectively a very important constituency for BPA. So
I wanted to dive in because I do think there are flavors of preference, and I think you spoke specifically to the preference to priority firm service.
Correct.
But there's also the regional preference that you mentioned, Crystal. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about regional preference, Shauna, and your view of regional preference.
Okay. So being from an organization, I did not work at a utility, so I don't have, and I have, I've always had the members of the whole Northwest, right? And so I've always thought about preference as the regional preference, and especially because I think about regional need and regional resources, right? And so, and as the markets have evolved and we deregulated, that idea of Northwest entities have first right to Northwest power. And the worries and hand-wringing about California coming and taking all of our power, or we put a conduit or a culvert in and run all the water south, kind of those conversations have been kind of sort of the jokes. But the truth of the matter is that we are a unified group, and the valuable energy from the hydro system in the Northwest serves the utilities customers of the Northwest. Yeah. And that's been just Principle 101 when we're thinking about our regional loads and resources, and from the perspective of the overlaid group of utilities.
Right. And I think about it, with the experience I had working for the Bonneville Power Administration and the development of the river system. And it was developed for public good. And so it was developed to benefit the people of the Northwest. And so that's why we have regional preference.
It's a really good articulation of the reason why. It's for public good.
Yeah.
I think we do have to think through, like, it is for the regional good, and then there is preference within there to public power within the statute that encodes the munis and co-ops and PUDs in that preference. Yeah. Anything else we wanted to add on preference?
Well, I think about how we share the benefit of the development, and there is the residential exchange.
Yes.
And sharing that.
You want to get into residential exchange? It is on the settlement of the residential exchange.
Do you have an answer yet all figured out?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the we're going through this next contract with Bonneville, and one of the things that I was running across later was encoded within the contract for customers was the PNUC, and we were supposed to report. We have to report. Is there history there? Is there an oral history of how they dragged you? Please tell us the oral history of how you got drug into the contract.
I was going to meetings, and I'm finding out that PNUCC is listed in the contracts, and it was way more significant than what is there. And the best we could do is get it whittled down to utilities, it was after, when was the year that those were signed? Do you remember? Anyway, in the spirit of making sure everybody's adequate and bringing all their resources to the table.
Which is part of the 1980 Northwest Power Act, was regional adequacy and regional sufficiency. That's part of preference, is you need to make sure you're adequately planning for resources to serve the region.
And so utilities are supposed to check in with us and tell us what their loads and resources are, and we would report that to Bonneville for them and let Bonneville know that everybody's checked in. And kind of created an extra job, which was nothing that we were asking for. And it was really extensive, and we got it whittled down to that.
That's good history.
Yeah.
That's good history.
And go read it. I mean, we kind of went, what? Because not
It's
all
3 paragraphs now. You whittled it down. I don't know where it started from.
Well,
but
all
it's
I
not.
know is I had some little munis, and then it gave somebody at Bonneville a job to call us and say, "Do you have your data in yet?" And we actually it helped us move our request date for data and all kinds of things to be able to make the date. Anyway, that I'm glad you read that. So you know what to fix. Because
keep me up to date on that, please.
Yeah,
but
we will,
honestly, the generating utilities, the big utilities are all doing all of their own work, right? You got the resources to meet your need. And the little guys are relying on Bonneville, and they're doing some of their own work. Then they compare notes with Bonneville, and then they come to a disagreement that they're in the ballpark somewhere. Telling us about it isn't going to change anything, right?
There is, even for the large utilities, I'll just go defend the Northwest Power Act momentarily. But in order to establish the adequacy of the region, you do need to know the capability of the component resources within the region. So as Bonneville was entrusted with the adequacy of the region in the Northwest Power Act, part of that was making sure that those resources in the region, part of that, the rights that customers have for power is based on using your own resources within the region.
But that happened like 30 years later, right? If it was 2012 or whatever, right? Because the act was 80.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, it took...
It was a different contract, so there was new considerations.
Yeah, but anyway...
we don't need to get into those weeds.
No, and the thing is, we were saying, the argument from our point of view was the utilities that have generation are already... between Bonneville, the Northwest Power and Conservation Council, and PNUCC, we were collecting all that data, and we were working very closely together. The council staff, the Bonneville staff, and the PNUC staff shared notes and made sure we all had the same list of resources. No one's going to miss Grand Coulee Dam. It's still there.
It's still there.
And so as a little small hydros came into play, it got to be really tricky, but we spent a lot of time keeping track of all that together and making sure we all have the same, that we all know where all the generation is.
Yep. And
we still do that.
Any of those power analysts at electric utilities that listen to our podcast and always send their forecast to PNUC, but then copy Bonneville, some email at Bonneville, that's the reason why. And you can thank Shauna for getting out maybe a bunch of other requirements that you would have had to do. Just that one email complies with that contract. Yep. So thank you, Shauna, for whittling it down. And thank you,
welcome.
Crystal, for maintaining how simple that can be.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Hey, can I make one more point about preference? We got time. So it's kind of interesting that there is it's in federal statute that there is a specific regional benefit, and I think that sort of created a little bit of tension over the years. You probably are all familiar with calls to privatize BPA and open up the BPA system. So I think there's I don't know if it's unique, but it's a pretty unusual circumstance. So I think it does kind of leave the Northwest open to some political machinations, but you always have the underlying law to. So unless they change the law, Bonneville preference will presumably remain for a long time. So
I wonder, does anybody know if TVA has a similar preference in their statutes, in their organizing statutes? I would assume so.
I would think so too, because they formed in the same time period. I would, but I can't verify.
And WAPA as well. I think WAPA has some preference language
to their resource, their federal resource.
To their federal resources. Okay, well, we already talked a little bit about Whoopsie Daisy, but we're going to go talk about Whoopsie Daisy a little bit more. So it shows up, there's a few things on the milestone
what
that I'm talking about.
What does stand for, Mark?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, do you want Mark to answer that?
I know.
I'm waiting.
I know. You want me to answer that? Yeah. Washington Public Power Supply System.
I think it's on this card, too, that I'm about to read. Oh. So there is a milestone on the timeline in 1968 where the Joint Power Planning Council announces its $15 billion 20-year hydrothermal program to build a series of large, mostly nuclear power plants.
Can you just stop there and say those dates again and the amount of money?
1968, $15 billion. I don't know if I mumbled that to make it sound like million, but billion.
In dollars at that time.
That time.
At that time.
And if you think about it now.
100 billion?
Yeah, we should maybe whoever rewrites the Chronicle or updates it could put in nominal terms what that would mean and
should.
publish dates.
Yeah, just
that
for
would be
impact.
Really, for impact, absolutely.
I bet you could do that.
Well, after that 1968 milestone, there's a 1980 milestone, which we talked about, which was the Northwest Power Act, creating the Northwest Power and Planning Council that later became the Northwest Power and Conservation Council.
Yeah, you got it.
Whew. And then
Trade your
there's
P for a C.
a 1983 date on the timeline where the Washington Supreme Court invalidates Washington Nuclear Project's 4 and 5 participant contracts, and the Washington Public Power Supply System declares a $2.25 billion bond default.
Wow.
Whoops.
Cute.
Who wants to talk about whoops and what it means, even for today? Because I think it still has a lasting impact today and the way we think about Bonneville and we think about the region's plans.
It still has a lasting impact because it's in rates.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're still paying off that default.
Yep.
Anybody want to take up whoops and talk about it? We've talked about it a little bit leading up to this, but I'm curious about the reporting of the lawsuits. But go ahead, Crystal.
Yeah. So it's oral history, not lived history, because I wasn't working for BPA at the time. But people who were remember that the administrator at the time, Peter T. Johnson, was burned in effigy. Because he was going to choose to shut that down. It was, Steve Wright talks about, being out there with the direct service industries and the change there because, their rates were going up and they were leaving the region, but he was never burned in effigy. And that just has a really big impact because it was a difficult decision for the administrator to make at the time. And there was a lot of public attention to it. And people were riled up, mad as far as like what I understand. And I can't imagine, what that protest looked like where, the administrator, something, like him, people were... It was, I just share that with you.
People knew who it was, and then were mad enough to
like light something on fire.
Yeah,
burned in effigy.
Yeah,
that's the oral history that I've been told.
Do you know if is that when they came to create the top quartile to help with their rates?
The DSIs?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Did I miss this up by
later.
bringing in the DSIs? Because I just meant like the decision that the administrator had
but I
to
can
make at the
imagine.
time.
I just don't know. I'm going to have to go home and do some homework. I'm curious about that because I do think part of all this change and whether it's the costs and because of whoops or not, but losing the top quartile, that flexibility of 1,000 megawatts. Having that in your hip pocket's huge. And when they went away...
Is that the non-firm service to the DSIs to make sure that if you had insufficiency, you could shut off their service?
And there was X amount of minutes that they could be without power and not freeze up all their aluminum. And I mean, it was a really, today, even more significant benefit if you had it than I can think.
That's a lot of demand response.
Right. It's not one of the high-tech companies that want every 4 seconds to be perfect power.
There is something to learn there from that history, though, because making aluminum is, you make more money the more you make, and continuous service is valuable. And there is an interest there. Maybe there is a value of lost load less than the value of, indiscriminate lost load. Maybe you can have some price responsive demand, the buzzword that I enjoy using.
It was the first demand response.
Yeah, that
I didn't know DR.
It's price responsive demand, right? And it's used for demand response.
Yeah.
But what was it like? What was it like at the time?
Well, I wasn't. I was born then, but I wasn't working in energy at the time. But yeah, I think Chris was right. There were a lot of public protests also in utility territories for their rates that Bonneville passed. I think the rates doubled or tripled Bonneville rates within a very short period of time from what was then the largest municipal bond default in history. And again, clearing up sort of origin story. But another thing I think that's kind of interesting from the perspective of whoops historically is that obviously it put the kibosh on any future, new large nuclear. But today, Columbia Generating Station is a pretty valuable carbon-free resource. So it wasn't a complete debacle in terms of what it actually created. Now we're seeing a lot of interest. We're all seeing interest in small modular reactors. So it did have that sort of near-term, a lot of cataclysmic. But there, was, I think, some positive things that came out of it eventually. But as Crystal said, the rate thing, that goes for many more years, I believe, right? Before all those are paid off, right?
Yeah.
So,
Am I right to think that there's still the reverberation of the dry hole risk and that kind of risk aversion to capital investment and resources in the region?
Absolutely.
I
think
agree.
we've seen it come up this year. The Northwest Regional Forecast, PNUC's product, with the increase in loads that we were able to project this year by getting that information from utilities. We haven't seen that kind of load projection since the early 1980s and before that time. And so the PNUC staff put together a graph that shows, kind of that history from 1960s until 2002. Right, our data is 2003. Sorry, and so I think people are looking back at that and also very skeptical of the potential for loads to increase like that. And certainly, there's a lot of people thinking, we tried to build to those loads before the uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
And look what happened.
Yeah.
So you were asking if we still think about it, and I've certainly heard that a number of times this year.
Yeah, but at the time there really weren't that many options, right? If you wanted to meet the projected loads, you had nuclear, you had coal. That, in terms of large scale plants, I believe that was basically all. Natural gas hadn't quite come in, and of course hydro as the base load. But so
there's one perspective on all of that, and that is the word risk. And the risk shift that through deregulation and all of that, the risk people have figured. I feel like the utilities have been able to be less risk. They can be more risk averse because the marketers and the IPP folks have stepped in and they're taking those chances.
Yeah.
And their business model's different than the utility, and so I feel like it's fed that.
Well, that's a great segue because the next card was about the Energy Policy Acts. I put a card for both 92 and 2005 because I'm not sure I know the difference.
Me neither.
And you wanted to talk about it. So Energy Policy Act of 1992, the Energy Policy Act of 2005, deregulation, the relationship with FERC and pro forma tariffs.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that? I think 2005 was precipitated by the Northeast rolling blackouts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of
the
that,
New York thing.
the New York thing that started in Ohio.
And so that added oversight, right?
Oversight from that's
the reliability, right?
The reliability components.
Yep. Because of those, I mean,
Yes.
New York was out 20 years ago. Yeah.
20 years ago. Passed into law granting FERC new authority to oversee reliability of the grid, to prevent market manipulation, and to promote transmission investment. That's what happened in 2005. But you wanted to talk about 92 and deregulation. And what else do you want to get into?
I've said most of what I was thinking, right? And that really is the shift in the force and the way they were doing business and the way they're thinking about even working together, and whether Bonneville moved transmission to Vancouver, right? Dittmer. And so those guys couldn't talk to each other anymore. And there was that
because of SOC. Mm-hmm. Standards of conduct.
There we go.
The SOX. and all of the big utilities that had multiple roles, right? And so it just changed how everybody could work together or couldn't work together. And we had bumps in the road.
Yeah,
right?
We had bumps in the road.
Right?
You can keep going, but I was going to segue it because we talked about the Energy Policy Act a little bit, but then we have the energy crisis that happened in between the passage of these two. We had the deregulation and the formation of certain independent system operators, and then we had a couple bumps in the road, and then we got to 2005, and FERC has new authority over reliability.
Before you know it, utilities reporting to PNUC for their Bonneville
Before
contracts.
you know it,
Right? I mean,
PNUC
it's all
comes
tied
around.
together. And it's
PNUC's been a trusted contributor to the region the whole time.
true.
Do we want to talk? I want to talk a little bit more about the energy crisis because I still think, similar to Whoops, there is a lasting impact of that on the
absolutely.
West. Mark, I think NewsData reported around that a lot and the corresponding lawsuits and stuff like that. What did any thoughts or anything you wanted to share about the energy crisis and the importance of that? In the
Yeah, I
West?
wasn't, directly writing. I was writing our conservation newsletter at the time. I wasn't really writing as much for Clearing Up. But one of the big things that was part of the energy crisis was a lot of calls for conservation and also a lot of buybacks from primarily industrial customers. So that was one of the and also a lot of calls by the governors for public to use less power. And I actually pulled up something from the council website that said demand for electricity in the region began falling in late 2000 and had dropped 13% by the next 2 years. So those kind of calls for conservation, I think, were effective in mitigating some of the worst. It didn't mitigate by any means all of it or even most of it, but some of it. So I think that was a big factor, in while the energy crisis was going on, and because Northwest at that time had a long established history of conservation, as you all know. So it kind of continued, but sort of expanded from that. So
yeah, what was it like to work at PNUC during the crisis?
We were busy working on it. It caused us to get involved with, and we coordinated share the shortage agreements.
Share the shortage.
And so we spent months and hours every day and hosting gatherings of the big utilities, working with the power pool. And it was said that there were agreements in place and mechanisms in place. If we had a blackout or the system shut down, they were prepared to know how to bring it back up. But what they didn't have is a coordinated way to turn things off if they needed to. And so sharing the shortage, and we collected signatures from all the 20 players or however they were with whatever the agreement was. And we did that for multiple years in a row after that. And so the biggest utilities had come to a conclusion of, what they would do and what they were willing to agree to. So someone was going to be really short, how they would either work together they weren't short, or they would spread the risk, and they made sure that the hospitals and all of the critical load was taken care of.
So is this like a precursor to like energy emergency alerts that we hear about now? It's like
yes,
and
very much so.
When FERC got into that reliability, it's like a encoding of the practice.
And I remember none of the details about what was in that, because I'm all about the people. I know the people that got in the room and how much time we spent together and the effort it took to create it. Political figures were involved. So the PUCs and our legislators knew that this was happening. And that was part of it, is to make sure they knew that utilities were taking care of business and going to keep the lights on best they could. And protect us from California taking off this power, right?
Regional preference.
Yeah. So anyway.
It was really striking how much the political figures were visible during the energy crisis. I mean, I think you remember the California governor was eventually recalled.
He was.
As a direct result, Gray Davis, from that. And I know the Northwest governors, I don't know if it wasn't nearly as severe up here, but I'm sure that was on their radar.
I remember Larry Cassidy doing, as the chair of the Northwest Power and Conservation Council, doing a press conference asking people not to use their Christmas lights.
Oh, wow.
Wow, that's serious.
Yeah.
I mean, and they never spoke up like that, right? That wasn't necessarily their role, but the utilities and decision makers urged the council to do that.
Right. Yep. And I don't know the history very well, and part of it I learned from listening to Public Power Underground. But at the time, with the California energy crisis and the CAISO, the governance of the CAISO.
Yes.
Yep. So it changed significantly because of that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we would, we would like something more independent to explore. But the reason why it is what it is today is largely because of the result from the energy crisis.
Yeah, we did an episode after the EDAM regional, the regional expansion summit.
Yeah.
And the chair of CAISO's board of governors at the time mentioned that time and the process and the governance questions that arose and how we ended up with the governance within for the California Independent System Operator that we did because of the regions.
Yeah. So I think that's an important piece of history to understand as we think about what we think we need now.
Yeah. And how we got to where we are. And it was a response to something that...
Right. It's always so important to understand how we got to where we are when you want to change what we have.
Exactly.
So I can't I always think of analogies, right? And so some of it is... Because questioning, is it something we still need to do, or is there something different we can do, right? So the analogy is grandma always cut the ends off her ham. And so the daughter asks the mother, why do you cut the ends off the ham, Mom? Well, grandma always did it. Well, why did grandma do it? Well, it didn't fit in her pan. I mean, right? Or however that story goes.
But you have so much room in your oven now.
Yeah, right? And so... I mean, it's to any new staff, new to the industry, new to thinking about power, you always want to ask those questions, but know, for the most part, the incredible people before you had very good and solid and valid reasons for doing what they're doing, and with the tools that they had. And anyway, when you think back to all of this, Paul, I just can't get in from my 40 years, the people that work on this and the sincerity that each and every utility representative brought to every gathering, no matter where the forum was, their customers or foremost at the front of their minds, and everything they were doing was all about that. Whether it was providing power, keeping their rates low, other kinds of community service. I mean, just bar none.
Yeah.
It's been an incredible place to be.
Yep. It's the communities we serve.
Energy Northwest is proud to provide clean, abundant, and reliable energy to help meet our growing needs. Energy Northwest is proudly advancing the Northwest's clean energy future.
I knew that.
Yeah, of course.
I knew that. They also have a great training program, which isn't in this promo, but I'll just provide it as a promo as well. They have a great internship program where college graduates can get an internship through Energy Northwest. I've talked about it many times on this podcast. I'm a big fan of that program. Wasn't in this ad read. They didn't write it in, but I'm just inserting it because I'm such a big fan.
All right. Well, sign up, boys and girls. Learn more about nuclear energy and its full potential at energy-northwest.com. That's energy-northwest.com.
One of the other things that was a precipitating event, we talked about the Energy Policy Act of 1992 and deregulation, but there are a lot of milestones that didn't show up on the timeline. There were the Northwest initiatives to do in the Northwest market expansion. That's where I want to leave it there. So it is not in here, but it is in PGP's market retrospective, which I will link again in the show notes. Every time we talk about markets, we have to talk about the market retrospective.
Good work there.
Because it was great work. And it ties into, I think, really well the 2012 milestone on the calendar around wind projects in the Northwest, because I think that has driven us towards market evolution in a way that prior efforts didn't.
Yeah.
But from the market retrospective, I have the dates in here. So Indigo from 1995 to 1998, RTO West from 2000 to 2004, Grid West was an effort from 2004 to 2006. The Northwest Power Pool Market Initiative, or MC Initiative, was 2012 to 2016. The EIM was 2014. RAP, the Western Resource Adequacy Program, was 2019, was kicked off. And then last year and this year, I don't know which one the state quote is the date, but the Markets Plus initiative from SPP and the Extended Day Ahead Market, or EDAM, initiative from CAISO are also important milestones on this. I connect them through the integration of variable energy resources. How do you all think about market evolution and whether that will go on the milestone. You already mentioned it the next time it gets updated.
That's right. I think this is an interesting place to be because, we've lived this history that you're talking about. I have personal experience with RTO West, and I want you to repeat those dates again. RTO West was 2000 to 2004.
Yes.
And we just spent a lot of minutes talking about the energy crisis,
Yes.
And now reflecting on it, I can see why we were really trying to kind of tout this idea of regional transmission organization, not just an entity, but really what that wide footprint might give us and what it might prevent. But we were really up against that crisis, and there was a lot of political interest in what we were doing, and we were trying to build understanding, but also nobody wanted to have to go through that again. They might lose their job, right? You mentioned it. But the delegation at the time, Representative Peter DeFazio, was very against it. Senator Maria Cantwell from Washington, also, you couldn't do that. You didn't want FERC to do that to the Northwest. You didn't want to be in a position where FERC could let that happen in the Northwest. And so we were really up against it when we were talking about RTO West. And it's probably one of the reasons why we weren't successful, even though we tried really hard to move that forward.
And the Marker Retrospective does a really good job of talking through those issues and the ways it wasn't successful in the past and the concerns about, or the ways in which it may be different this time. So please go read it, because there are ways in which it could be different when we do it again. Yeah. And to learn those lessons, but to look forward. I'm curious what it was like at PNUC during those initiatives and whether.
Did you list 2 or 3 before?
There's a bunch of them here.
Yeah. Well, so
Indigo. I don't know what any of those acronyms.
Acronym.
It is an acronym. I don't know what it stands
independent something.
Yeah, governance.
Independent grid operator.
Yeah,
Indigo.
Yeah, capital O. And the RTO. Anyway, that happened at the PNUC offices and in the PNUC conference room.
Did it really?
Yes,
Yeah.
and we had folks hired to facilitate those. So we were very involved. I can see some of the players around the room today, and I'm more focused on who was in the room than all of the things that might have transpired out of those. Looking back today, this is just my opinion totally. People were afraid to take that next step, right? And whatever that would be. I also think that maybe there was still not as much clarity on what the real need, just some clarity on what you were going to get from the result.
Yeah.
And maybe you have better tools today, and whether it's a computer simulation or even access to market worlds and things that we didn't have before. And so I would hope in this next time frame, that's why I left, so somebody else could figure it out, right? But I would think that there's a lot more, there's more at stake, there's more clarity on what we need, and there's no going back. What we've had hasn't worked. And before this, we landed on the, what do they call that? You're doing all your options, and there's the state of the system today, right? You just kind of stay with the status quo.
Yep.
And so status quo ended up being the answer multiple times. And so that retrospective, I talked a lot with the authors of that, right, about this. And there were a lot of notes that you have available to you about just what was going on. It wasn't in detail, but it was happening at that table.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just believe that we're at a point now where status quo isn't working. And so you have finally the what it's going to take to get to the next iteration.
Yeah.
Would be, and I know nothing. I mean, that's just gut reaction to what's been going on.
You know a lot.
You do know a lot, and I appreciate
I know, but I
you being
can't
here
spit it
to
out.
Share a lot.
Sorry.
PNUC was a table, it sounds like,
Yeah.
where people gathered to talk about these types of things. Anything you maybe want to share about what other things PNUC is involved in today?
That's right. We continue to be that table and to bring the people together to think about, what we have in common. And you mentioned it many times, Shauna, the people in this industry who want to do what's best for their customers, for their members. And so it's an opportunity to think about the challenges ahead and to identify those opportunities. And there is a small group that's getting together that's talking about transmission and doing it differently than what we have and than the way we have been doing it. Because as you mentioned, Shauna, status quo, we are not going to have the grid of the future that we are imagining now without doing something different.
Yeah. So there's a group of people getting together to talk about transmission solutions for the west or the Northwest.
Are they?
It's got to be bigger than the Northwest.
Are
Paul.
they at the Keys Lounge?
More to come.
More to come. Anything more you can share on this news, or is that just a group of?
Yeah, no, it's informal right now, but I think that there will be something that for us to share. And really, this needs to be different. It needs to be expedient, and it needs to be inclusive. And a lot of the people involved were involved in the development of the Western Resource Adequacy Program, WRAP. And there's a lot of lessons to learn from that. And I think that we have a good foundation to build off of.
Good. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, cool.
News.
Mark, so what do you think about the market evolution?
Yeah, I think you hit on probably the central theme there, in that decarbonization, the rise of wind and solar in other parts of the West has really spurred, I think, much more serious talk about. Mark, I don't think it's any coincidence that the EIM is probably, of these initiatives, the most successful to date by far. I think $4.2 billion in total benefits. And I think as people see that and as they experience that and they get the benefits for their customers, and I think that will have a lot of legs. I'm also kind of intrigued. Obviously, governance, right, is maybe the key issue to resolve. So, to really bring this home. But I'm kind of intrigued by the latest idea from some of the state regulators to try to get some kind of independence governance around the West that somehow incorporates California but isn't CAISO. Because SPP has their a program I think has a lot of potential, but it doesn't include California, right? So some melding of those two behemoths I think is maybe where we're headed, but.
Good projection of the future.
Yeah.
I feel like the way to solve all that and get it all is everybody freeze, right? You do that freeze, and then those few people stop and talk. Well, everything's frozen. and then they get back in position with the answer.
Well, then we had a pause button.
Yeah. No, I like that. Because it does feel like that sometimes. Like there's just so much going on.
If we had a
timeout. Just stop.
A transmission timeout.
Focus.
Well, thank you. I hope you all enjoyed this. Before we turn it over to Mark for his closing thoughts, I did want to just express gratitude. Thank you. Did you feel valued and appreciated, Shauna?
I do. And thank you. This is really fun. I love what you do here. It's very impressive. And I've watched others. I don't watch all of them. Some of them are way more technical or
academic.
Thank you. And I'm glad to know you're doing it, and that I hope the folks that are now engaging, I can let those go because I've got things to do.
You do.
I've got applesauce to make. So I watch the infotaining ones.
Good.
And this one will be a very infotaining one.
I think we
But I have learned so much from doing this. So thanks, Paul. This was a great idea. And just, you matter because you do this. You matter because you put us, because you bring us together and you build understanding by doing public power underground. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome, and thank you. Thank you. I hope you feel valued and appreciated. Was this fun?
I'm so glad I did this. Yes, thank you.
Good. Thank you for coming together. And Mark, this is my way of saying thank you, and I hope you feel the appreciation of the energy
I completely
community.
do, and like was said, I feel like this has been a tremendously fun gathering, and I've learned quite a bit as well, and it's a pleasure to be among such smart and engaging and historically knowledgeable people. So.
Well, Mark, thank you, and you've been a tremendous asset to the region too, and Clearing Up really is. And we've known each other quite a while.
We have.
Yeah.
We have. We go back.
We go way back. It gets me, yeah. I've been very nostalgic. Can you be nostalgic after being gone 1 year?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now,
There's no statute of limitations on nostalgia.
Okay, well, I was wondering. It sounds like a really old thing, so I'm not really old yet, right? So, but I really do. I've appreciated you all this time and what you guys have done. And I told Crystal I was going to bring up a couple of April 1st editions, and we didn't get to
don't
Yeah,
that.
we had that idea of
Send
a
those
two
to-
truths and a lie.
Send those to our new publisher and to our Clearing Up team. They are always looking for ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, before we wrap up, thank you for all that you have done at Clearing Up, for the staff there who care about these issues, who listen, who follow up, and to do the hard work of writing it down. And sometimes it's not always right, but you're out there, you're building understanding, and I just appreciate that. And it does matter, and it's a very good resource for our region. It's a resource for being more educated about what's going on around us, especially if we can't pay attention to it. So thank you. It's how I end my week. And it's a really good way to stay informed.
Because there's so much going on.
There's so much going on.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And when you say that, I certainly I think that really speaks to our team. I mean, I'm I guess the leader for a couple more hours, and Cyrus before me, and I know Cyrus felt the same way, that we're a product of all the people that work at NewsData. Yeah. Whatever you read, it's a team effort all the way around. So, but I'm glad to have value, and I'll say, PNUC and Public Power Underground are two of the best places for community to be expressed. I think there really is an energy community. You all have been part of it. You've all seen it. You've been very active in it. But that's one of the most, I think, striking things about this industry. There's a really, even when people don't agree, and obviously not everybody agrees, even a lot of the time. So, but I think there is a palpable sense of community that's really, really fun to be around, and really, really great. So.
Yeah, well said. Public Power Underground is a co-production of NewsData and Seattle City Light. You don't have to be subscribed to NewsData to get this podcast, but it sure makes the podcast make a lot more sense. You can find episodes of Public Power Underground on Substack, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Special thanks to Public Power Council, and specifically Karen Heim, for our copy of the Public Power Chronicle. I'll share a link in the show notes. If any of the friends of the Underground want to reach out to PPC to get a copy, please do. It's a great resource for the information and the history of power in the Northwest. Public Power Underground for electric utility enthusiasts. Public Power Underground, it's work to watch.
Well, it's been a real honor and privilege for me personally to work for NewsData, and to have led it the last 10 years or so as publisher and editor-in-chief. I kind of stumbled into energy journalism 32 years ago. Just happened to find a job at NewsData, but it's been a tremendously rewarding and fulfilling career with a lot of really fascinating issues like the ones we talked about today. And it's really an honor and privilege also to be, I guess I said, a member of the energy community that you all certainly represent. I think that's something really, really special. So, looking ahead, I personally see a really bright future both for NewsData and the electric industry. I know NewsData, we have new ownership. We have great people in place. We have some service, a lot of new services that we've offered, and we got a history. So I'm hoping that will continue under the new leadership. And I think for the energy industry, with what we've been talking about, looking ahead with things like electrification and decarbonization, it's only going to get more important, and the work that you all do is only going to become more important and really vital for our entire society. So I think the future is really bright, and I'll look forward to following Shauna into retirement and learn what that's like. But hope to at least stay on top to some extent of what's going on, and who knows, maybe even participate in some form or fashion. I think that's still to be determined. But thanks very much, Paul. Public Power Underground has become one of the key, again, sort of forums in the regional energy industry. I know a lot of people who listen to it and who really get a lot from it. So thank you for that. And PNUC, again, has been one of the best places to be to find out what's really happening in the utility industry, without question, ever since the dawn of time. So thank you for all that you've done. And I guess that's it.
We started in hard times to bring us all into the laughter.
Public Power Underground is a production of Seattle City Light and NewsData. The views expressed are our own and not the official views of Seattle City Light, Tacoma Power, NewsData, or the organization of the guests also appearing on Public Power Underground. Public Power Underground is electric utility and electric utility adjacent topics from a power department's perspective. Today's episode was written and produced by Paul Dockery and Almaz Nagesh, and it's edited and published by the stellar team at Pioneer Utility Resources, with sound mixing by Lucas Smith and video editing by Brendan Delzer. If you are interested in having a podcast edited, published, or produced, please reach out to our friends at Pioneer Utility Resources. Our theme song, Roll On Enthusiast, was rewritten, performed, and recorded by Aaron Guillory and Ian Bledsoe. You can find Public Power Underground on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please share with electric utility enthusiasts like us and give us a rating or review on your app of choice if you enjoyed the content. It helps other energy enthusiasts like us find us. Public Power Underground for electric utility enthusiasts. Public Power Underground, it's work to watch.